Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. I have with me former professional wrestler and still wrestling to some degree, and now the promoter and owner of St. Louis Anarchy, Matt Jackson. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am doing great, and I am super excited. We were speaking briefly before that on IWTV. One of the first live events that I watched almost a year and a half ago was St. Louis Anarchy, and I loved every second of it. And I just think it's an amazing promotion, and it's a very special place in my heart because I was dying for better wrestling than WWE and everything else that was out there. And maybe not better is not the right word, but something different. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about you, though, before we get into St. Louis, because you were a wrestler very early on with Gary J. You and him were going around. So, what got you into wrestling?
Uh, I started watching wrestling back. I think WrestleMania 6 is the first wrestling I can remember that I watched as it was happening. And I was just always enthralled with the emotional connection of wrestling, like the characters and how people would connect to that. And then from there, it just kind of grew from there. I never really had any desire to be a wrestler. That didn't come until later on when I realized, well, because I always thought you needed to be an athlete to be a wrestler. So I was like, well, this is something I could never do. But then I quickly learned about independent wrestling. I was like, well, heck, I could probably do this. So I went ahead and trained to be a wrestler, and then did it for I don't know 16 years, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah, and let's. I don't want to go through the entire history, but obviously during that time, you met. I think he's your best friend, Gary J, and a few other people. And so, what was that friendship like, and training with Gary, and really running the road with Gary in a lot of ways? And Gary J has been on this show twice at this point. He's probably going to be coming on a third time. And so, what was that like, and really having a friend who sort of was with you throughout the early years, for lack of a better word?
Well, I knew Gary before we wrestled. I knew Gary in high school, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but for me, my youth, I grew up in some bad areas. I was like on the streets doing some things, and I met Gary, and through that realized he liked wrestling too, and that kind of introduced me to like ECW type stuff, which I had never seen before that. So through that, then we had some mutual friends that don't wrestle no more that introduced us to like a place that was training some people, and we went ahead and gave that a shot. But for me, if not for that, I don't think me and you'd be having this conversation. I probably wouldn't be here to have it. So for me, that was very important because it kind of wrestling steered me away from the kind of life I was living before that. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And as far as the training went, it wasn't our initial training was real bad. It was done by a nice guy, but he just didn't know really what he was doing because he was trained by a guy that didn't know what he was doing. So our initial training was really bad. Um, so we ended up meeting the two dudes that actually did train us, and they gave us better training. But even them, they weren't like traveled, seasoned people, so they could only teach so much. So then we started doing some seminars, and that's when our real training kind of happened. We're through, like we did like a 12-hour seminar with Matt Seidel and Delirious, then some other seminars, and that's when you start learning how the craft really is because you're learning from people that have actually wrestled in multiple states, stuff like that. And those early years of traveling was just a crapshoot. You never knew what kind of show you were going to go to. We were still learning on how to do things. So, like all these years I wrestled Gary before he was who he is now, he still hit really hard, but didn't necessarily know where to hit. So, we would hurt each other because we would hit each other in the face or jaw and just beat the crap out of each other. We didn't really know yet, but you learn over the years, you know, how to do those things. So a lot of those early days were just trial and error type stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about the early days because indie wrestling in 2020 is very different than indie wrestling in 2004. And even in all the way up to 2010, I would say, and even probably we could go another 5 years. because indie wrestling really changed in 2015, 2016, in my opinion. So, what was the early days of indie wrestling and your experience like going out there? Because you sort of described it as a crapshoot and it wasn't as connected, it wasn't televised, it's not streamed like it is today, it wasn't as accessible. And it was, I think it's safe to say it was a little bit harder and it was a little bit more underground. So, what was the scene like when you first entered and really those first 4 or 5 years in it?
It was way different. Like, so you had MySpace kind of come around during our early days. So you had that, but yeah, you didn't really have streaming service. You didn't have, not everybody had DVDs. So you really couldn't ask somebody like, hey, I'm about to go wrestle in this place in Arkansas. Is it any good? Because no one would know. So we would just go to these places. And a lot of times they would be just terrible, terrible places, but you'd have no way of knowing. And two, just the landscape was different. So right now, you can go to like in Indiana and you have multiple promotions there that are quality promotions. You go to Chicago, there's multiple promotions. You go to Texas, multiple promotions, Georgia, multiple promotions, on and on and on. You really didn't have that when we first started. You either had really good promotions or promotions where there might be two or three good guys, but everybody else may not be very good. You didn't have this middle ground where people could learn and grow and become better wrestlers. You kind of had a thing where you became good, and then Ian Rotten would book you, and then you would do good there, and then you would start doing Ring of Honor pre-shows in your particular Midwest or East Coast territory. Then you would get on there, and then you were like a top indie guy. That was like the only way though back then because you didn't have a million places that were like quality like IWA South, Mid South was back then. Where now you have a lot of places that are kind of in that middle ground that are really quality places where people can learn and grow. You didn't have that when we first started.
Yeah, and to even go further, I think also it wasn't as connected as it is now. You look at the East Coast is very connected. The Midwest is somewhat connected as well. And I don't know about California, but California on indie wrestling, everybody knows that Samoa Joe, Kazarian, Chris Daniels, and John Cena were all relatively in the same class, overlapping each other out in SoCal back in the day. And so that's been connected for a little bit. But what was even it like just on a wrestling connection and driving and going to place to place to place? Because it was very much fragmented as well.
Oh, sure. I mean, we had our carload of guys, and I mean, there'd be five of us, and we just hop in and go. And I mean, we've done the trips like we've done St. Louis to Minnesota to Texas in one weekend. We've done St. Louis to Philadelphia to Texas, back to St. Louis in a weekend. We've done St. Louis to California in a snowstorm. It's just how it was then because you would go these places and then you would make the connection. So then you might meet a group of people in Texas that would go, oh, hey, there's a place in Oklahoma that's decent, or there's a place in like Amarillo, Texas that's decent. You should try to get there. And that's kind of how you made your connections. It wasn't done over Twitter or Facebook where you would just add a whole bunch of friends. And there wasn't like this community. There was within the territories, but not on a broader scale. Not to mention getting booked. Like, I mean, I remember sending out hundreds of resumes every day just to indie places and hoping like, well, maybe someone will get back to me.
So to
I
sort of
remember,
talk about that, because that's interesting. Because when people hear resume, and I think of resume as X, I apply and send out my job resume. What is a wrestling resume? Because that is so interesting to me. And when you say you send out a resume, what was that like? Because that's something that's kind of dead and lost a little bit in
yeah,
2020.
I mean, it was more just like, name, gimmick name. You can throw your height and weight on there, who trained you, how many years you've been wrestling, notable places you may have wrestled, notable names you may have wrestled, with some references and maybe a match link or two and a picture, and that's kind of what it was. But you would send. That's what's funny because now you will see some promoters on Twitter like they'll complain and go, "Oh, I can tell if someone just sent me a copy pasted message, like a copy pasted resume, and I won't respond to those people." And I would have to say to them, like, you must not have been around in the day when that resume was the only way to get booked. And my God, you're not going to sit there and type out 100 unique emails. I mean, the people just weren't doing that. It was a copy pasted resume back then. So you can kind of see where things have changed. Now, just sending out that copy pasted wrestling resume might actually hurt you in getting a booking.
Yeah, and then let's fast forward. When did you start noticing the changes in wrestling? Because obviously 2004, 2005 is when you started coming in. But when did all of this start changing? Because I think, in my experience and sort of how I came into the indies and watching it, was late 2018. So I'm a baby compared to this, and I have had to do a lot of catching up. But when did you start seeing the change in indie wrestling and it becoming more popular? And WWE obviously is sort of alienating fans right now. Impact has had their problems in doing that. AEW is going to eventually run into that as well on the mainstream. And indies seem to be at their peak right now. And they seem to be in a platinum age versus a golden age, in my opinion. So I'm curious when you started seeing that building up.
I would say about 2000, late 2016 is when I started seeing that the indies are becoming more popular. I mean, for me, I had a break in 2017. I signed with NWL where I was writing their TV. And when I was doing that, I was kind of immersed in it. So I wasn't paying much attention to like outside of that. But you could see where things were just exploding as far as popularity goes. And I think that comes from people not being happy with mainstream wrestling and things like that. But yeah, I would say 2016 is when I started noticing like it was becoming more popular because I mean our crowds at Anarchy have definitely went up from the time we ran before I did NWL and what we've done since NWL's closed is definitely a big difference.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because I don't want to push MLW or what you said. They just went right out my ear because they're closed and they're not relevant anymore as far as this conversation. But when did you come into St. Louis Anarchy? Because St. Louis Anarchy has been around for a while, and I don't know the full story because I don't know because I don't. What is the full story of you getting into St. Louis Anarchy? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, I created St. Louis Anarchy. It's a promotion I started. The place that trained us ran a promotion called the Lethal Wrestling Alliance. And I don't exactly remember the year, but I started to book that promotion. Oh man, probably 2005 or something, maybe even before that. I started booking it, and we eventually hit a peak there where we felt like there needed to be a change. The LWA had kind of run its course. It was never really mine. It wasn't my like creation, and I wanted to be able to do something that was mine. So that is when I decided to start St. Louis Anarchy, and we loosely worked with a promotion in Texas called Anarchy Championship Wrestling for about 2 years when we initially started the promotion, and then that kind of stopped. But I mean, I've been with Anarchy since it was created in my bedroom in an apartment in St. Louis.
And so to talk about Lethal Wrestling Alliance and then taking that and then building St. Louis Anarchy sort of on top of that, but different at the same time because Lethal Wrestling Alliance ran from 2003 to 2011, just to give some wrestling history, and then St. Louis Anarchy started in 2011, if I'm correct on the numbers.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's right.
So what was that like sort of, because I don't want to say you had infrastructure, but you sort of had you had some connections. You were obviously heavily involved in Lethal Wrestling Alliance. And so what was that like starting a new promotion but having that experience? Because we see it sometimes where people don't have any experience in a promotion and they're trying to run one, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, the difference between LWA and Anarchy is that LWA, I don't believe things can be run, I guess, by like a committee, right? So LWA was run, there was like four people that were in charge, me, three other people. And I just, don't feel things work best that way. So once Anarchy started, it was just me. But really, to me, there's like three different phases of it. You have LWA, which was just a learning experience on like how to book pro wrestling. And then once Anarchy started, it was okay using those tools that I picked up in LWA to learn how to just keep booking a good wrestling show and helping brand our product and then creating what would be stars for our particular brand. And it was a very good, well booked pro wrestling show. And it had like we've done a great job of branding. We've created stars. All of that was a success. But now it's like this third phase of Anarchy, which is running it as an actual business. Like Anarchy, the first run was a fantastic pro wrestling show, but not a fantastic business as far as like making money and being able to grow. Where now I've been able to learn from NWL and working with a man who's multimillionaire and built his own brand, like how to do business. And so that's kind of what's brought us into this third phase of Anarchy, which is not just running a fantastic pro wrestling show, but running it as a business with the goal of growing and making a profit.
So let's talk about sort of. I do want to talk about that third phase because I love business. I'm just started my own business, and I love that topic in general and everything that I'm doing and how I'm branding. And this is just an expansion of this entire show. But I do want to talk about the first two phases because I think one of the things that St. Louis Anarchy has done extremely well is that you have built four amazing wrestlers, and then there's about three others that you've also really helped to give a shot on. And then there's one more, and she's going to kill it sooner rather than later. And she's actually my next podcast that I'm releasing, and we're going to talk about her too. But because I love Billy Stark. She is so good. But let's talk about the four because it's Gary J, Matt Fitchin, Davey Vega, and Warhorse. And I think that's kind of your brand. And so, how did obviously we know how you and Gary go way back, but what about the other three? Because Warhorse is killing it right now, and the guy is amazing, and he's one of the hottest wrestlers ever on the indie scene right now. And then what? How did Davey Vega come in and Matt Fitchin come in to it? Because I think that's really speaks to St. Louis Anarchy. Because those are the four you think about when you mention St. Louis Anarchy.
Yeah, I mean, so Vega I've known since he started. A guy named Dingo, who was a really big influential part of St. Louis wrestling years ago. He trained Vega and Fitchett, so he's a friend of mine. He introduced me to them, and I just started using them for Anarchy, and they were in our carload, and we traveled everywhere, and it was just about putting them in this world and growing their confidence as wrestlers. So Warhorse is kind of a different deal. Warhorse was an Anarchy kind of in the first run, but he was still really new. By the time Anarchy comes back, now he's rebranded himself and he's like a bigger star on the independent. So I didn't really have anything to do with his rise. Like I was doing NWL when I come back doing Anarchy again. He's rebranded. He's become a big star in the area. Where Vega Fitchett, I was and Gary were all with me from the very beginning of like their start, and especially Vega and Fitchett because I didn't start training with them. So Vega Fitchett were kind of from the ground up. I didn't make them by any means, but as far as them becoming better wrestlers, better performers, gaining confidence in themselves to see how good they could be, all of that happened through Anarchy. And yeah, so we got lucky because you have those three guys, and then you also had ACH, who was a huge part of our first run. And as those four became better wrestlers and better performers and gained this confidence, they kind of grew, which then the brand was able to grow. Because, yeah, people would think of them and think of Anarchy. So obviously, then when they branch out and they're killing it everywhere, people know that like their home promotion is Anarchy. So it would help us out too. So we kind of all helped each other out as far as the brand helped them by I would bring in guys to work with them that I knew would push them and make them better and help them gain confidence. And by them living up to their part of that deal and killing it with those guys, they became better, which made the brand more popular. So we all kind of like helped each other out in that way.
And obviously the besties. Wow, I can't speak to the besties are right now BLP's tag team champs. Gary was on Beyond in the last season of Uncharted Territory. Warhorse is on so many promotions defending his IWTV championship belt. And so what because that must speak that speaks a lot of volume to St. Louis Anarchy. It obviously expands your reach because now people know that these guys, this is their home turf in many ways. And so as a promoter, you know, luck, skill, foresight, we could call it whatever you want to call it, but how does that make you feel in this third run and this third phase of St. Louis Anarchy? Because that gives a lot of credibility to the brand name.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the third phase goes, it's great to see those guys going out and getting big opportunities. So then you got to start thinking about who's next, because there comes a point in time where Gary and the Besties and Warhorse and those guys, I mean, they're finished products as far as like what they're going to do at Anarchy. Like, I mean, Gary isn't going to get any more over at Anarchy than he is right now. So then you got to think about who's going to be next, because in 5 years from now, I hope none of them are working for Anarchy because they're off doing other shit. So I have to think about who are the next five people who are going to be the next guys or girls to step into these roles. And to me, that's what separates like a brand from just a wrestling show. You think about who's going to be next and who are going to be the next five, six people that you're gonna build this thing around. So yeah, it's great to see those guys getting more opportunities. That's how this is supposed to work.
And to even talk a little bit about a few other people, because there's two more names I want to drop here that really have established and I feel maintain your brand. Jeremy Wyatt, who is technically your champion. He is the Gateway Heritage champion, and what he's doing is brilliant. And the guy is probably the best heel in the Midwest by far, by far. That guy is great. And then Kurt Stallion, who has done a lot of wrestling, he's now signed to WWE essentially. And so, as a promoter again, how do you feel about both of those guys? Because obviously Jeremy Wyatt adds so much credibility, and he's such a good heel, and he's really a great mentor to a lot of your younger roster. And then Kurt has been working his ass off. And what is it nice to have had a play and a hand in breeding a talent to make it to that big stage?
Well, again, with someone like Kurt, he's kind of like Warhorse. Like I didn't, I worked with him a lot, like towards the end of the first run of Anarchy, and then I worked with him a lot here the last, I don't know, 4 months right before the pandemic. He's another guy that went out and he built himself and he put the miles in and became great. And now he's where he wants to be. Like WWE was a big goal of his, and now he's there. So I'm very happy for Kurt. Jeremy Wyatt, I believe Wyatt's one of the best wrestlers in the world. I think it's criminal.
The best kept secret. Shh.
Well, he shouldn't be a secret. Wyatt should be everywhere. Um, there is a Ring of Honor Pure Wrestling tournament happening right now, and how he is not in that, I'll never know. I think Wyatt is one of the best wrestlers in the world. The man, I believe, is 41 years old, and I watch him just tear it up with people half his age. He's got a wealth of knowledge if you're willing to go up and talk to him and, you know, pick his brain. I mean, he's fantastic. And yeah, he's been a huge part of our third run.
He's also a very charitable individual, where him and Fred Yehi just a few months ago put on a charity match, and it was a 60-man Iron Man match, and it was a 50-50 split. The proceeds going to two charities, and it was a very cool thing. And Journey Pro was also involved, and you guys were involved as well with that. And I think that's up on IWTV. I would like to say it. I think it's also up on YouTube. It might be up on Twitch as well. So that's something to keep in mind when we talk about him, everybody watching this. That definitely check that match out because that was amazing.
Yeah, it's a very good match. Journey Pro set that all up, so Walter from Journey Pro deserves a lot of credit for that. And Niles Plunquet, who let us use his winery for the taping of that. So it was a really good group effort that was able to raise. We weren't real sure how it would go because with something like this, you never know. But I know it did over $1,000 for charity, so we were really happy with that.
And now, before we get into the next generation and several stars and wrestlers that you are building and definitely have a hand in, you mentioned something that I think is sort of a little bit the antithesis of WWE and even a little bit of AEW and a few other companies. And that is you're now in the phase that you're not just building your brand anymore, you're building the next generation, you're building stars. So that when your older wrestlers leave or they get signed or they disappear because they're moving on to doing bigger and better shit, you have the next crop coming up. So when did that sink in and when did that idea come? Because that's a very different step in this process. And so what is that like now that you're foreseeing the future and you're foreseeing several of the next stages?
I mean, that was always the goal from starting Anarchy is you have to build stars within your world, right? Like just because Warhorse could probably walk down and walk through the airport, might not get recognized. If he walks through Spalding Hall, he's a huge star. So you have to build these stars within your world. And it's always been a mindset of who you're going to build next. Like, so I've always operated that way. Um, and it's just the way things have to be done is to do that. And you do that through listening to the audience. You do that through seeing who has potential that could step into those roles and figuring out how to get them to utilize the tools they have to become stars. And it's all a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes people will surprise you and it'll be people you necessarily didn't expect. It's just all a process, really.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of those stars because I think Thomas Shire is on that list where that
Yeah.
guy has gained so much appreciation in Spalding Hall. He has gained confidence. If you watch his matches, those two fights with Gary J were unbelievable. And Gary definitely did a great job in both those matches and put over Shire. And there was a reason why you see Thomas Shire with a bloody mask, and the crowd instantly fell in love with him. I think that was the first time ever that happened where he got like a standing ovation. So what is that like, and how much do you have in that and building him up and really giving him opportunities because he's kind of, I don't want to say the four pillars can be replaced, but he's definitely going to be in their league, if not better than the four pillars of St. Louis Anarchy.
Yeah, I mean Shire's a guy I've worked with for a while. Met him in Texas, worked with him in ACW. He's always had potential. He just never could get out of the blocks as far as consistency goes. Like he'd come up here for a while, but then he would get hurt, so he wouldn't. I mean, this is a man. He broke both his legs like years ago, so he was able to finally get healthy and moved up here in 2017. And then I started using him for NWL on house shows and stuff, and he did really well in those situations. And it's all just with him. It was, I feel, getting a repetition to build up that confidence. When you have two good matches, but then you might break your leg and be out for a year, I mean, you kind of start over again. So he's been able to consistently work now since 2017. Not to mention, I mean, his pedigree of being trained by Dory Funk Jr., going over to Japan at a very young time in his career, kind of all laid the groundwork for where he is right now. And yeah, I mean, if he's able to keep doing what he's doing, he's going to do really well.
And also, the thing I like about him is that he's in a interesting story where obviously he's got some beef with sort of a cult like group that features Jake Durgan and Angelus Lane. I think names slip in my head, and a few other people, and he's got some issues with them playing into all this. And I kind of like that aspect where he broke free from that also. So what is that like to add story to him? Because it also adds more of a flavor in many ways. We don't really see that on the indies per se.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all part of the process. I mean, I feel like people. I mean, there's a whole lot of really good wrestling out there, whether it's on TV or not. So the deal to get people to keep coming back is emotional connection. I would be lying if I said, "Oh, you're not going to see good matches anywhere but St. Louis Anarchy." Like that's just not the truth. There's plenty of great wrestling out there. So it's getting people to emotionally connect to the characters and to the stories that's going to make them continue to watch what we're doing. And this is just another part in that betrayal and all that stuff. Like, it's just all part of the process.
And then talking about the process, Matt Kenway, that guy is completely has changed his attitude in wrestling. If anybody knows anything about him, very much late 2019, he was much more of a hothead. He was much more like I don't know the right words, but anxious and very very gun ho. And he comes back from COVID and he's way more methodical. He's in better shape and he seems to have a cooler head now, for lack of a better word. So what is that like? Because he's kind of another guy that I think you got to look out for and watch in wrestling right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's a guy that studies a lot of tape. He understands the character part of what we do. He's gotten himself in tremendous shape. I mean, he was already in good shape. Now he's even in even better shape, and his like in ring stuff has caught up to his potential. So now he should keep getting better and better. He had a really good match with Gary at the last show we were able to have, and I think he's going to build off of that. I think that the blocks that we're doing will be really good for him.
And what is that like to see a wrestler mature? Because in many ways he has matured, and you're a promoter and you're a booker, and obviously, I mean, you said before that sometimes wrestlers surprise you. It was very surprising to see that match with him and Gary go at it because it showed a level of maturity from what he was a few months before. And so, how do you feel knowing that you have wrestlers who are maturing and becoming adults, for lack of a better word, and becoming veterans, not just in talent, but in maturity, and being
Yeah,
locker room leaders, for lack of a better word?
yeah, it's good. I mean, Kenway is a guy that he lacked a lot of patience, and he wanted the world right now. And a lot of young guys are doing that. Like a lot of young guys do that, right? Like they'll come into Anarchy and they'll see the besties and Kurt and Gary and Warhorse all just tearing the house down, and they want to do that too, which is great. But it takes time to like build into being that kind of a wrestler. Not every wrestler like that's not their job because not for everybody. But Kenway always had that potential, so he wanted to be that guy, and now that has caught up. Now he can be that guy, so it's great in that aspect that somebody's wanted something so bad. Now they're finally able to do it, which gives them even more confidence, which ultimately will make them even better. So yeah, it's great.
And what does it give you? Because obviously you now have what a wrestler can do, and now you can book better, and you could have faith in your roster in many ways, I would imagine. And so it's great for him, but what does that do for you and the product and the brand and building the next generation?
It's good for me because I mean, if people if people continue to keep getting better and people keep coming to the shows, then I can pay my rent and electricity every month. So it's great for me for that aspect. But I mean, look, like a big thing with me is I get way more out of watching other guys get better and accomplishing their goals than what that does for me. So obviously, like, yeah, it's great because as long as everyone's doing well, the brand will do well. But there's a good chance 15 years from now I may not be here. Like I may not be doing Anarchy, and a lot of these guys will still be wrestling. And so for me, watching them realize their potential, it does so much more for them, which makes me happy. That's my job is to help them get better. So what it does for me is it shows I'm doing my job, which I don't really need to be rewarded for that. That's just what I'm here to do. And so when you see that stuff, it's great because it just shows that they're working hard, and and if I can be a small part in helping them realize their potential, then great.
And then the last person I want to talk about is Billy Starks. And Billy was on my podcast, and that episode is the next episode coming out and should be released in the next week or 10 days, I should say. And obviously, Billy is killing it, and Billy is going to be a superstar. There's no doubt about Billy. She is unbelievably talented for where she is at life. So what is that like, knowing how young she is and how good she is and how she's only getting better? And I would say in the last year she has improved so much, and it's scary good.
Yeah, Billy's great. I mean, if she decides that wrestling's something she wants to do as she gets older, and I mean, she's 15 years old, she may find other interests she wants to do, but if she decides that pro wrestling is like the avenue she wants to take, yeah, I mean, she's the sky's the limit on that. Billy is incredible. Very few people I've come across in wrestling, man or woman, has like the natural charisma that Billy has. I've only seen it with Gary J, ACH, and Mike Outlaw. If you're not familiar with him, he's a St. Louis independent wrestler that just have a natural charisma about him, and Billy, it falls into that as well. So if she decides that this is something she wants to do as she matures and keeps getting older, I think she'll make as much money doing this as she wants to make.
And to even talk about that, because St. Louis definitely gave her a shot and gave her a ground to launch off from. And you said that you might not be doing this in 15 years from now, but if she wants to, she will be. And so, what
Right.
is that like for you? And because we talk about legacy, and I'm thinking about mine, and I'm 27, and I'm significantly other younger than you, but in many ways, you're going to be part of her legacy, whether you're
Yeah,
doing
that's
this in 15
great.
years or not. And so, how does that make you feel that you gave a young woman a massive opportunity to really have the entire world?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just my job. My job is to provide her with the tools I can so that when she keeps moving up, someone else can keep providing her with the tools she'll need to keep moving on. When we started Anarchy, I mean, St. Louis was kind of like a wasteland as far as independent wrestling goes. There's a lot of shady business, a lot of people not paying their wrestlers, and at the end of the day, if what I've built with Anarchy provides St. Louis to be better, then that's a job well done, and I can ride off into the sunset with that. As far as like Billy goes, I mean, yeah, it's great to have a hand in people's development for sure as a performer, and we've provided her with a place to do that, and yeah, that's great because she's probably going to go on to do a lot of really big things. So when they make her like WWE video or whatever, her documentary, if they want to wheel me in to say a few words about her 20 years from now, I'll be happy to do it.
And I can't wait. I'm sure a bunch of us can't wait for that either, because it's going to be fantastic, and we all see that. But now let's talk about the business side of all of this, because obviously COVID is in there as well, and that's in the mix. And so, what has St. Louis Anarchy? Because I don't know how long you've been on IWTV for, but obviously IWTV is a game changer, and I think IWTV has been around for 3, 4 years at this point.
I think so.
And so,
We started with them in 2018, July of 2018.
So, when did that occur as far as you getting the invite or you doing the live streaming and getting a lot of your content up there? And then what has that evolution been like of you streaming a show once or sometimes twice a month? Because that's a game changer, because before a lot of wrestling was taped, but it wasn't live streamed. And now I'm in Washington, D.C. I sometimes spend time in Connecticut, and I've never ever been to a St. Louis show, St. Louis Anarchy show, because it's not in my vicinity, but I've watched almost every single one of them. And so, what is that like, knowing that you have fans who've never been in Spalding Hall but know everything about it and know everything about your wrestlers and watch it on their Friday nights from all over the world?
Yeah, it's great, especially because our first run of Anarchy, we had a terrible time getting DVDs made. So a lot of our content wasn't really out there. So there would be a lot of people who would want to see it, but it would take us forever to get DVDs made. So then fast forward to us coming back, a lot of people wanted to see what we were all about. So it kind of made that relationship with IWTV easily able. We were able to easily start that up. So they came and live streamed our first show back, and then from there it's just been, they live stream all of our events, things like that. So it was easy to like build that relationship because a lot of people have wanted to see our content. We just weren't able to really get it out very well the first run.
And I think one of the best things that happened, and it was a happy accident with you guys and ICW, No Holds Bar, is that they got rained out by 2 hours in Jersey, and they had to move everything into Pit Fighter. And you
Mm-hmm.
guys were supposed to compete with them, and what wound up happening is that since their show got rained out, I think a lot of people flocked in and saw what you guys were doing, and then ICW Pit Fighter, and that was Block A, his first show. So, what was that entire experience like of you coming back from COVID, having that situation where ICW is in an unfortunate position? People obviously flocked in because they wanted to watch wrestling, and then they went to go watch the ICW No Holds Bar show right after. And what was that entire thing like? Because
Yeah,
not saying you had control and we wish them ill. That's not what we're saying here.
you hate to see anybody have a situation like that where they get rained out or have to scramble to figure out what they're going to do. So that part of it, that sucked. But for us, yeah, I mean, we had a large number of live stream viewers that night. So hopefully, enough people liked it to where when we were able to do another one, they come back. It would have been better if we would have been able to have our show in September like we were supposed to. So now it kind of feels like people who may have watched it, now you're talking that was like 3 months ago, 2 months ago now. So that part of it sucks because who knows how many of those people you retain when you don't have a very quick turnaround. But for that particular night, yeah, it was unfortunate for them, but I mean, it did put a lot of new eyes on us. So hopefully, maybe some of them come back.
Yeah, and let's talk about the situations because we're going to back up a little bit. So, Block A and the entire thing, from my understanding, and Charmin and correct me at any point here, is that COVID hit pretty much March. You guys had 3 or 4 or 5 shows planned in that time period. All that had to be scrapped, and storylines had to be scrapped. And then you get the approval because now you can sort of do wrestling, and COVID's a little bit under control. And then you kick off Block A. So, and so A, what is the concept of the entire tournament for starters, and how did that all come about, and what was supposed to happen with that? And we're talking about what actually is happening.
Okay, so originally we were going to run monthly for the first time this year, and we were going to have anarchy events, and we were going to have like series events, which would have been a series of different tournaments that would have like all tied into the end of the year. Well, unfortunately, yeah, COVID hit. So right off the gate, we lost our submission tournament and one other tournament. So that idea kind of goes out the window when you can't have the tournament. So then when Illinois went into phase 4 of their reopening, we could only do 50 fans. We could only sell 50 tickets. So we couldn't run our normal business only selling 50 tickets. It just couldn't happen. We would have lost like $800 at an event, even if we sold out. So that couldn't happen, obviously. So the idea of the blocks, obviously, the block format is straight off of the G1, like how New Japan does their G1. That's the format. But we did it. I wanted to do it in a way where it essentially splits our roster in half, and then we would run 2 events a month, thus being able to sell 100 tickets in a month instead of 50, which would have allowed us to profit at like a razor thin margin and we can do business that way. So we can go from profiting a certain amount to a much, much smaller amount and survive. We cannot lose hundreds of dollars a show and survive. So the whole point of the Spirit of Spalding tournament was just so we would be able to run under the restrictions of 50 fans at a show.
Now, what wound up happening? Because let's talk about what happened with St. Louis and everything that was going on and up and down with the COVID numbers. And so, what happened? Because obviously, there's been some hiccups in the plan.
Yeah, I mean, just like it's very unpredictable, obviously. So what happens is in Region 4, the cases skyrocket. So the governor of Illinois rolls back the reopen. So now everything's closed. However, within this week, we have learned that they may be opening back up at the end of the week, which then will allow us to continue the blocks. But yeah, I mean, we were put on hold once the governor rolled back the reopen. So we're just kind of patiently waiting to be able to run events again.
So, with this situation that's going on, how does that affect the block? How does that affect the tournament? Because clearly, we should be on show 4 or 5 at this point, but we've only had one show, and that's the Block A side, and we haven't had the Block B stuff yet.
So if we're able to run, we'll be running a show on Friday, October 16th. And what we'll do is a B block doubleheader, which means it'll be two shows in that night, the first two B block shows. And then we will run a show October 23rd, which will be the second A block show. So then rolling into November, we will have two shows apiece, and then we will just keep our schedule going as we originally announced it, because we will have two shows in each block done. So that's the plan for right now. Hopefully, we're able to do that. Just all kind of depends on if people wear their mask and all those things.
And then what is this like? Because this really makes you the perfect adapter in many ways, and rewriting and rescripting and reanalyzing and repositioning. And so, what is that like for you as the writer and the owner and the head booker and the head promoter to be constantly adapting and saying, okay, look, 2020 we got to survive and we got to move all these pieces on the chessboard here to make it work.
Yeah, it's definitely annoying. Like I don't like putting 8, 10, 12 hours into something and then it not. I mean, I've rebooked this particular year 3 times, so definitely sucks. But it is what it is. There's nothing that can be done about it. So it's just I don't really worry about it as far as our business goes, only because I know where we are as a business, and we'll come out the other side of this. We're just going to be patient. We're not going to just do shows just to do them or run over somewhere else and do a show to have one. We're going to be very patient. Unfortunately, that could mean longer periods of time off, which sucks for our fans and for us. We want to be having shows, but for us as a business, we're going to be very patient and we're going to come out the other side of it.
And given all of this and you being patient and you doing monthly, bi monthly shows, I guess it was supposed to be, how does that change the future of St. Louis Anarchy once we come out of this? Because I understand the amount of work that goes into it. I've had weeks where I've done 8 interviews in a week. I get how much work goes into it, but is St. Louis Anarchy going to be expanding? Because this concept in many ways is proving that it is possible and that people do want this content. I mean, I love the concept of 2 shows a month on a Friday night. I mean, it sounds great to me. So I don't know if that's something that you thought about exploring, but I definitely think because I view this and this concept as an expansion. I didn't view it as a redaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, we have a very good team. Our team works hard. I don't know if we would ever do 2 shows a month if we were able to like have as many fans as we want. We might. I mean, it just all depends on the circumstance. If we're inside of a building that we own, sure, we might do 2 shows a month. But if we're inside a building that we have to pay a rent to and all those things, then not so sure. Now I will say, as long as we're doing the 50-person restriction, the goal is to run 2 times a month. But I don't know. Coming out of COVID, it's going to be hard to say. It's just going to kind of depend on what's in front of us as far as bills and things like that. That'll determine what we do. Until COVID's over, it's kind of really hard to predict anything with the future because who knows what's going to happen.
And to even go off of this with the 2 shows a month, one of the best ways that people can support St. Louis Anarchy is if you don't have an IWTV account, you should probably pick one up. You could actually watch it on Apple TV. You know, if you got your iPhone, they have one for Android too. They have a bunch of apps that you could watch it on as well. And I think it's $100 a year if you buy it in bulk. It's not that expensive, all things considering. There's legitimately probably about 50,000 hours or close to it now of content up on it, which is phenomenal. And so, really good way how to support this is watching those shows, because the more people that watch, it affects their bottom line. The more people that watch the back shows, it affects in what is basically revenue sharing. Pretty much
Yeah.
is the definition of what this is. So seriously, when 10,000 people watch something, it benefits and everybody's happy. So where can people watch it? What date should people keep in their calendar? Even though things are changing with these tournaments, and also when you do a double header, are both of those shows going to be streamed, or is only one of those shows going to be streamed? How is that going to work?
They'll both be streamed. So will the October 23rd show. So that'll all be streamed on IWTV. If you use code STL Anarchy, you get 5 free days. So you can check us out there. The best way to support us outside of buying the live event tickets actually through our Patreon at patreon.com/anarchystl. Myself and Evan Jalistico do a podcast, Dollar Menu Mid Carters. We update every week to that Patreon. So really the Patreon is the best way to go if you want to support us outside of the live event ticket. If we're able to do events, we will be October 16th, October 23rd. I think November 4th is a Friday. It would be that one. And then November 18th. Or November 6th is the Friday. So then whatever 2 weeks after that, 19th, would be the next one. If we're able to do it, we'll know more tomorrow. So right now it's still all up in the air as far as even the 16th goes, but we'll see.
And going beyond Patreon, buying live events, watching it on IWTV, obviously, if you're not in the area or if you have health concerns like I do, like one of the things right now, and I'm going to say it so that everybody feels comfortable, if you have health concerns and you're a wrestling fan, like I love ICW No Holds Bar. And I say this and I've publicly said it, and I could go to their show because they're not that far from DC. I don't because I have health concerns. So I'm watching it and I will be tweeting at them. And so clearly, if you like wrestling, watch it is the next best thing if you can't go to the event and can't throw money at the Patreon. Definitely that. Also, what is all the Twitter tags to use for
Uh,
St. Louis Anarchy?
at STL Anarchy on Twitter, St. Louis Anarchy on Facebook, Instagram. I think it's at STL Anarchy. At STL Anarchy on Instagram.
And then obviously we just mentioned a bunch of stuff, but I'm also going to give you an opportunity. Where can people pick up T-shirts? Because I think you have some T-shirts. Where can people pick up other things? Where obviously we mentioned the Twitter, but where can people even support St. Louis Anarchy? I know that BLP is doing sponsor a wrestler. I don't know if you have something similar to that
We do not.
time.
You can buy a T-shirt at shopiwtv.live. It's through IWTV. They have a shop up there. We have some T-shirts. So if you want a T-shirt, that's the best place to get one of those.
And I think that that's everything. Unless you have anything else you'd like to promote relating to St. Louis Anarchy or yourself in particular, feel free. Floor is yours.
No, that's it. I appreciate the time. My phone's at about 7% battery, so if I promote too much, I'll be getting the boot here. But I appreciate the time. Yeah, just check out at STL Anarchy on Twitter for all the updates. Hopefully, we'll have some good news coming out here soon.
Well, before you get the boot, we end every episode the same way. And this is
Okay.
how it goes. Support indie wrestling, everybody. Obviously, we just went through a bunch of stuff to support. definitely get an IWTV account. That's first and foremost. It's the best thing for your dollar right now. You have hours upon hours of entertainment. If you're in the area, get a ticket. Those tickets sell out quick. 50 tickets goes like that.
Yeah,
Also,
we haven't
support.
had them last over 20. They've all sold out in under like 12 hours.
There you go. So you have to watch it on IWTV now. And then on top of that, support the Patreon. Definitely check that out. Throw some money at it. It's good if you like wrestling, especially if you're a fan of St. Louis Anarchy. You can get T-shirts. But if you don't have money, you're taking care of your family. The best way how to support right now is social media. Definitely follow on Twitter. Engage during these events. Engage with the wrestlers. Engage with the promotion. You know, one of the things that I always do is that they have a hashtag put at St. Louis Anarchy in that thing, or the actual, which is their Twitter, which is your Twitter, your company's Twitter. Put IWTV's Twitter in there and engage and comment and engage with the wrestlers as well as the promotion, because it is so important, because it lets people know, and more people who are looking at wrestling stuff will then say, oh, what is this? And they might be interested, and it benefits everybody involved. And if you don't do that, and the only excuse you have for not doing this, because social media is free, is if you don't have electricity or internet. And if that's the case, I would like to know how you're watching me, because there's clearly a business opportunity in it for me to make money and you to make money, and we can license this technology out and we can both become very, very rich. So please contact me. And obviously, you don't have internet or electricity, and you're watching this, so you have a way to do that. That is the only excuse, and there's no more excuses not to support in any capacity, whether that's economically, if you have some spare change, or for free on the social media channels.
Yep.
And that's a wrap.
All right. Thank you very much.